welcome. Thanks for coming. This is our 2017 Notice of Funding Availability General Information Meeting. My name is Rachel King. I'm with the Office of Economic Development from the City and County of Denver. I'll be your NOFA coordinator this year. So during this meeting, we'll be just going over a couple of the more general background pieces for the NOFA, what our priorities are for the funding, and then we'll finally get to your questions at the end of the meeting as well. So I guess without further ado, I'll introduce Rick Padilla. He is our Director of Housing and Neighborhood Development with the Denver Office of Economic Development. Thanks.
Thanks, Rachel. Good afternoon, everybody. Nice to see you again. I see some familiar faces. How many folks were funded by OED last year? Okay. Do we have some new folks, new organizations in the room? Okay, good. You can ask the really tough questions for these guys. I'll give you the deep dive. Listen, I just want to welcome you this afternoon and say we're really excited. I want to talk about a couple of things, if I may. The mayor's priorities for 2017 and beyond, and talk a little bit about what's going on with funding from a federal standpoint and a little of what you may have heard about what the mayor and city council is doing to try to create a permanent source of funding for affordable housing. Priorities continue to be under Mayor Hancock, affordable housing. For those of us that live in Denver, born and raised in Denver, have been here for any period of time, we're all experiencing what's happening with the housing market out here. It continues to escalate. Wages are staying stagnant or inching up not very much, and rents continue to increase. So that's a number one priority, one of the number one priorities for Mayor Hancock. Around that is economic mobility, what the mayor really understands and appreciates, and Seneca Holmes will talk a bit more about our collective impact strategy. But really, economic mobility is really, you can create housing for folks, you can create jobs for folks, you can create small business loans for folks, but you really got to look at it from a holistic standpoint as a goal. How do we really stimulate communities that we're working in across the city? And it's not only any one of those singularly, it's all of those collectively. Kids and education, for those of us that are parents, number one, kids, education. We're going to remain, if we want to remain competitive, not only in the city, but across the country, education's number one. With declining both federal and state resources, we have to look at what we can do locally to make our schools stronger and our kids competitive. We work very hand in glove with the Denver public school system, which we're very proud of. Another area that we look at, and it's really tied into all of this, is transportation. TOD sites across the city. A lot of the housing that you see going up is market rate. There's a greater need from my perspective, because I run affordable housing, mixed income housing at those sites. People want to get out of their cars. We want them out of their cars. It means you have to provide housing and access to education and other opportunities along those transit lines. Those remain very high goals for Mayor Hancock into 2017. And what we're looking at from a funding standpoint are those of you that are bringing proposals to us that help us support those goals. Jumpstart 2016 is the city's economic development strategy. We've been doing this for several years now, certainly since the time that I've been here. Small business development, small business advocacy, affordable housing, workforce housing, neighborhood development, workforce development. All of those Jumpstart 2017 will be publishing after the first of the year. We have Jumpstart 2016 that lays out our strategies behind that. Our team in housing and neighborhood development are really working towards meeting a lot of those goals, along with a lot of our other folks within the Office of Economic Development. All of this is really impacted by the amount of funding that we have at the federal level and why we have to be creative and leverage resources that we're bringing in locally. Now, if I can... Okay. This is just, and it's something you probably have heard Mayor Hancock and our staff talk about over the years, declining federal resources. We've lost probably 35% of our federal resources over the last 5 to 7 years. That's impacted, we know, all of you in terms of service provision, meeting overhead. So you're having to work more with less, just as the city of Denver has, and will continue to. Under Mayor Hancock, he really looks at not increasing our headcount in building up our administrative costs, but really working more efficiently with our partners, our nonprofit partners, our for-profit partners. So you'll see a lot of our discussions and our back and forth are really looking at what can we do, how much more can we do with less. Let me talk about a little bit in a bit more. There we go. There have been The scope and selection process will address exclusively some of the housing services. Again, that's the non-development stuff. Part of my staff, we're on the development side. Doug Selby, our housing manager, will talk about the development side of things and how we're really trying to meet low and moderate income families. But we're really looking at how do you provide and create affordable housing for special needs populations as well, and seniors, as well as low and income special needs persons. We want to improve housing conditions. We can't net new ourselves out of this housing crisis. Preservation is a key strategy for the mayor and the Office of Economic Development going forward. How do we stabilize the current housing situation? That's a big, big lift. Market increases continue to drive up housing costs. If you look at the amount of resources we put into affordable housing, we're a Band-Aid on a very large cut that's bleeding quite a bit. So we're really looking at creativity around that. Neighborhood development activities, Seneca's team, they're designed to address the needs of low-income populations with regard to job training, food system development. Seneca's team is really doing some innovative things around food systems development. Blake Angelo, who heads up that particular area, is doing a tremendous job. He just laid out the city's food housing plan, which we're very thrilled about, and I think we've put out, Seneca will talk more about this, some strategies to address this issue. Adult education, it's not only children, but it's adults as well. If you can't, I read something in the newspaper the other day, and correct me if I'm wrong, college-educated folks getting out, if you want to afford a down payment in the Denver metro area, it'll take you about 20 years to save up that 20% down. If you have a high school diploma, it's much greater than that as well. And think about our folks that don't even have a high school diploma. It's a competitive market. We're one of the fastest growing cities in the country. Millennials are flocking here. Boomers are flocking here. It's having severe stresses on our infrastructure as well as our education and our housing system. Colorado, for those of you that have lived here for any period of time, Colorado is really known for probably 70% of the businesses in the state of Colorado are small to medium-sized businesses. What you don't see a lot of, you're seeing more, are regional and corporate headquarters that are here. Thus, we have a huge workforce out here that we need to meet their needs from education, a neighborhood development, and a housing perspective. That's at a very high level, some of the things that we're looking at under the mayor's leadership, and the allocation of our resources will be working more towards that in funding initiatives that do more with less. With that, I want to introduce our is it Seneca? Seneca Holmes, who runs our neighborhood development.
Thank you, Rick. My name is Seneca Holmes. I'm the neighborhoods manager for the Office of Economic Development. So I want to go over some recent changes to the Notice of Funding Availability. First of all, public facilities and improvements are not going to be part of this year's NOFA. They will be considered on a rolling basis and only when projects are ready. And this really applies both to neighborhood improvements and PF&Is. We will this year, as a change from last year, be accepting economic development initiative applications. These are applications that address issues related to microbusiness and entrepreneurial development. As always, I think this is a slide that we've had in here for at least a few years. One of the things that we consider as a part of our program evaluation is past performance. The ability to leverage our funds with outside monies. Projects need to be ready to get off the ground. This is very important. Our funds are distributed on a time-limited basis. So as soon as we execute your contract, we expect you to be able to start drawing down immediately. If you're unable to do that, that will be held against you in future applications. Also, we're looking to really tighten up our quantifiable outcomes. So when we meet with you, we are looking to have clear, measurable, and data-driven outcomes you propose in the scope of development. And then organizational capacity. Obviously, you need to have sufficient administrative capacity to handle OED funds. They're very complicated. They require a lot of documentation. And for any contracts really that are over $100,000, you will require annual audited financials. Ineligible entities. These are any organizations that have defaulted on an OED loan. Any organization that has unpaid audit fees or performance audit fees will also not be considered for their applications, and any organization that is delinquent in taxes. That's both on sales and property. So we really instituted a new strategy last year. It was the OED Collective Impact Strategy. A lot of you are aware of it. I've communicated it to you, I think probably many, many dozens of times. What it really means is that we will have concentrated investments in a few targeted neighborhoods with clear geographic boundaries, that we will attempt to coordinate our investment activities with other community stakeholders, whether they be nonprofit organizations, foundations, or other private sector entities. Really, the emphasis again is on investments that can provide multiple measurable community outcomes. And really what we mean by this are investments that will support a number of needs of the community. So one example that I always use is we'd invested in a property acquisition at some point for Revision International. Revision International, with that investment, we were able to do blight elimination. We were able to help open up property for a community garden, and we were also, through that investment, able to help house a local nonprofit organization, actually a neighborhood organization. So that's what we mean by multiple measurable community outcomes. And then also ongoing relationship building. This means that we want to work in concert with the community. We want to make sure that our investments are supported by the residents at large, and that really we are not acting as kind of individual actors in terms of our investment decisions. Collective impact focus is economic development, employment and training, housing, neighborhood revitalization, health and wellness. And this is very important. We will be investing exclusively in the neighborhoods that are shown here. So East Colfax, Elyria Swansea, Five Points, Globeville, Montbello, Northeast Park Hill, Sun Valley, Valverde, Villa Park, West Colfax, and Westwood. So in terms of our neighborhood development investments, this year we have actually narrowed the scope of our activities. In part, that is because we have experienced a over 30% decrease in the amount of funding that has gone to public service for neighborhood development. And so our investments are going to be more economic development oriented than they have been in the past. Specifically, we are going to be investing in activities that are central to adult and youth job training and placement, food system development, which really means providing additional Denver residents with access to fresh food and education, or healthy food cultivation, purchasing, and preparation. Community-based wellness programs. So these are programs that would typically be operated by a nonprofit organization or a neighborhood organization that promote healthy eating and living behaviors, or offer other family support related activities. And lastly, we will be investing in micro business and entrepreneurial development. Specifically, we're looking for opportunities to invest in education, technical assistance, specifically for individuals and small businesses for the purpose of creating new neighborhood businesses or stabilizing and expanding existing neighborhood businesses. And with that, I'll turn it over to Doug Selby, our manager for housing.
Hi, I'm Doug Selby. I'm the manager for the City of Denver for housing. This year for the NOFA in housing, there's been 833 changes. So that was a joke, you guys. No, this year, and as you saw the slide before, we are still constrained for our federal funds. We consider the housing services that are offered through our NOFA and the partnerships that we make with the community organizations that provide those services out there to be critical functions. This is in alignment, as Rick talked about, with our development push in housing, the mayor's 3x5 challenge, of which we are currently ahead of schedule with. But this NOFA is not asking for those development applications. We will, for the balance of 2016, continue to take those development applications on a rolling basis, and that application is available on our website. So, for the housing services, we still are supporting this year in probably like amounts housing support services. This is foreclosure and, more importantly, in the past few years, pre-purchase counseling for new homes. This is also a mandate that all folks who are purchasing a city-invested unit, or as currently we have an IHO unit, an inclusionary housing ordinance unit, they must go through housing counseling services. So it's a very important service with the city. Aligned with that, we are still supporting our tenant and landlord's rights and related housing information and referral services program. This will be awarded to those organizations that provide these services, and we're still estimating like amounts for the demand for these services. With the rental market and the housing crisis that we're in right now, we saw no let up for the need of these services, so it is continuing into this year. The Rental Housing Access Modification Program, removing architectural barriers for folks in their rental and home ownership units of very low incomes. The Emergency Home Repair, targeted towards things like furnaces, roofs, water heaters for folks of very, very low incomes. Tenant-based rental assistance. This program will continue into 2017. We are going to provide this program to those at most need and those vulnerable populations. Our down payment assistance program. This is in conjunction with the program that we've run for a few years in partnership with the banks called the Mortgage Assistance Plus program. But we are still offering the down payment assistance. We are still seeing an overwhelming need for this for folks of low and moderate incomes, and are still going to offer this program going into 2017. Single family rehabilitation program. This is for single family homes. We're not rehabilitating single families. But the homes, we are still seeing a big push for this program, and in alignment with what Seneca talked about with all the multitude of neighborhood programs that are out there. This is the one program I would say in housing that is also shoring up the neighborhoods and keeping those neighborhood stocks intact, as well as allowing people to stay in their homes. We are also going to continue our support, and we are looking for a like amount from HUD, fingers crossed. I'm not predicting any elections up here, for the Community Housing Development Organization support. These will have to be, just like last year, tied to specific projects, to specific addresses, and we will pay for those development staffs up to the limits that we've listed here. Housing opportunities for persons with AIDS. I look for this program to continue also in a like amount, and this is targeted towards those folks and their families with HIV or an AIDS diagnosis. So I'll be available for any specific questions afterwards, but we'll continue and turn it over to Nicole.
Good afternoon. My name is Nicole Edwards. I'm the Contract Administration Supervisor in OED. And so after these fine gentlemen have given you all of the details about the funding and the programs that we're looking to support in 2017, I get the wonderful job of coming in and talking to you about compliance and performance. So we just want to make sure as you're making your applications, we would really hate to see you spend so much time dedicated to submitting it and then you struggle with the technical review. So I want to just take time and do a little bit of housekeeping. For those of you that are returning applicants, you're pretty familiar with the process, but for those of you that are new, and especially new to federal funding, it's really important that we share with you what the compliance requirements are. A couple of things that we'll talk about: any projects that we enter into, the City of Denver always does its due diligence, and as a result of that, we always perform an environmental review on all of our contracts, regardless of the funding source or the intent of the project. Now, for those of you that do neighborhood and public service, don't panic. What that means is most times we've conducted that review on your behalf, and it came out that your program was exempt because you didn't have any construction or things of that nature, rehabilitation, rehab, none of those things were happening. But it is the diligence of the City of Denver to ensure that we do that to stay compliant with our HUD funding. Where it is applicable, we also enforce our Uniform Relocation Act compliance. And in most cases that has to do with construction, so I won't really just bore you with all of the details of that. It's very lengthy. However, there is compliance there. So if for any reason you actually make an application to what Rick and Doug refer to, which is our Public Facilities and Infrastructure, our PF&I app, that's rolling and on the website, you're going to do construction, you're going to do rehab, any of those type of things, then definitely we would be looking at the environmental relocation, and that also at some point could trigger the Davis-Bacon Act. And what that is in response to, again, is if you're doing construction, I see heads shaking. So when you're doing construction and things of that nature, and if there are federal funds into the project, it's required that we give you a roster that shows for the positions that you have in that project, that you make sure that they're being paid at a prevailing wage. So this adds cost to your construction. We don't say that or share that with you to scare you away. We want to make sure that you're informed, knowledgeable, and aware as you approach your projects so that you budget and plan accordingly. We also have what's called Section 3, and that's another HUD program that we have in coordination with the City and County of Denver certification programs. So this is where we're always imposing and making sure that low to moderate income subcontractors have an opportunity for these type of funding projects. So we would impose that as well. And then lastly, we shared this with you last year. It's always been the preference of OED to award contracts as we're looking at your previous performance, if you have history with us. Over the last couple of years, there was a change in the OMB circular, for those of you that are familiar with federal funding, and this gives us our guidance on how we basically administer and how we monitor that funding. Well, as a result of that, they have basically encouraged and stated that basically these awards, if a contractor is not performing, their encouragement is that we rescind and not partner, as we're not getting those deliverables. So we just want to make sure that everybody's aware that performance does play a part in the award decision, and you're also monitored and you're submitting reports on a quarterly basis. Your success is our success, so we do aim for you to be successful, but we just want to make sure we share that information with you up front. No surprises. Last but not least, I want to talk to you about SAM.gov, which is the Federal System Awards Management System. And what you need to do there, if you have not done so already, please go to www.sams.gov and ensure that you've registered your entity. If we cannot confirm and verify, we are not able to award your contract. So that is very important that you make sure you're registered. This process is electronic. We're all aware of technology and that it is not fail-proof like me. So therefore, you've got to make sure that you go there and make sure that you're registered. You also need to make sure that you have a CCR and a DUNS number and that it is active at the time of the award and at the time of your application. We will really spend a lot of time in the technical review ensuring that that information is there so that we can ensure as an agency that we're not cited by our funders. Okay? Last but not least, we also need to be able to verify your registration of your entity with the Secretary of State. So it's also very important, and it's also very important for those of you that are entities and you have various arms, that if you're making application under a different arm, that you make sure that you have registered that arm so that we can verify that. Last but not least, we have insurance information. See here? Okay, awesome. So at this time, I'll turn it back over to Rachel. Thank you for having me, and remember, sams.gov.
And I was looking around, but is Eric Wolf here? No? No? Okay. We'll just talk a little bit briefly about the insurance requirements, just again, as Nicole was stating, to make the contract process pretty smooth on the back end. If you are awarded funding, we want to make sure that execution of the contract goes well, both for our program staff and for your compliance on the back end. So one of the most important pieces of that is your insurance requirement. Denver requires the certificate of insurance to cover both commercial general liability, business automobile liability, and workers' comp and employers' liability. There are a couple of exclusions in these categories, and if you have questions about those, we can obviously help you with that through the process. One of the biggest little indicators, if your program is working with youth at all or special population, the sexual abuse and molestation language cannot be excluded from your certificate of insurance. So please keep that in mind. Just make sure all of those items are in order when you have your application going through WiseHive. Let's see, with that.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
But it doesn't, it's not excluded, but what about when it's, there's a part where it's not stated, so then it's actually included? You want it to be actually stated on there because the writer might not have space on it for that. But I think we kind of talked about this at the Head Start one, right?
I'm sorry, just to interject, if we could just ask if we could finish the presentation, and we'll open it up for questions and answers. The only reason I interject and say that, we want to be fair to you and everyone else that is going to make an application. So all of those questions will be recorded, and then we would release an official addendum to the process. So I just want to make sure we have our listening ears on and we're able to capture everything that you're asking. So we will come back to that if you'll table. Thank you.
Okay, so moving forward, now we have our schedule. Obviously, the applications became live and available last Thursday, September the 1st, and today here we are at our general information meeting. Questions. So as Nicole was mentioning, we'll take questions at the end of this meeting. Anyone who is not in attendance and who's watching this recording on the website, or if you have friends in your industry who couldn't make it, we will be accepting questions at oedproposals@denvergov.org. That'll be on the next slide as well for you to write that down. However, any questions that are not answered today in our meeting will have to be received in that written format. And then you'll see the next line there. And just to back up a little bit, those questions will be due this Friday, September 9th at 4 p.m. Our time, Mountain Time. So please make sure you get your questions together, and if you can't think of any today and you're going back through the information and something comes up, feel free to send that question to that email box and it will get addressed. That method will be with the addendum. We will issue that addendum on the OED Funding Opportunities website. That will be issued on Friday, September 16th. So we'll have a week to process, make sure we give enough time to our program people and make sure we get the proper answers to those questions. But please get those questions in by this Friday, September 9th, and we will get those answered by next Friday, September 16th. Then we finally have our proposal deadline. That will be Wednesday, September 28th at 4 p.m. Mountain Time. Please keep that in mind. Again, we are using WiseHive as our application system. This is an online system. It is an automated process. That means we have a deadline date programmed into the application, and it shuts off at 4 p.m. Mountain Time. I've noticed a couple applications getting started. That's fantastic. I would highly recommend to get into the program right away. Just get yourself familiar with the application. Even if you don't have all of your ducks in a row yet or all of the information, Go and check it out, see what types of attachments are required. It does take a little bit of time to work through the application. So if you're starting at 3 o'clock on Wednesday, September 28th, you're not going to make the deadline. So just keep that in mind. So moving forward, we'll get to some questions from you guys, and I think our partners at Denver 8 have set up a microphone right here behind these first couple rows of chairs. If you wouldn't mind going up to the microphone, that way we can get them recorded. And if we don't have an answer for you today, we'll certainly research that and get those out with the addendum as well. And again, any questions additional to the ones in the meeting will go to oedproposals@denvergov.org. And then if you have any technical questions about the Wise Hive application, you can either email that address or you can email me. But you can only email me if they are technical questions about Wise Hive and not about the NOFA itself. So my information is all over the NOFA guidelines, the application checklist, I believe. So go and look at those documents as well on the funding opportunities page, and they'll give you a lot of background information that will be useful during your application process. So I think with that, we'll go ahead and get started with questions if anyone wants to be brave and step up first.
I had a question about the 2 years, and I think it's only for the neighborhood grants, not the housing and down payment assistance. The 2-year time frame.
You mean the contract?
Yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately, because of the year of funding, we were going to be funding year to year, just because the uncertainty of being able to continue funds over a 2-year period.
So we should ignore that in the.
Yeah, we must have missed that somewhere. I didn't see that. So I didn't see that. But yeah, we stopped doing the 2-year time period per contract last year.
What it says, it's 2 years, and you re-look at it the second year. So if the performance is okay, then you fund it the second year. That's what
Yeah.
it says in the RFP or the NOFA.
Yeah.
So we should just ignore that.
I would ignore it. What's happening now is that we're kind of in a state of flux because of the funding, and also we are constantly having to kind of because of the funding, we're reprioritizing our program over time. So the nature of our contracts will likely adjust year to year.
And I'm sorry, we wouldn't expect for you to just ignore it. We appreciate you bringing that to our attention, and it really is an earnest mistake, and we will correct it in the addendum process.
Okay, thank you.
Okay?
Yeah. Veronica, the 2 years is applicable to the housing piece, however.
Huh?
It is applicable to the housing piece.
Oh, it is?
Yes, not for the neighborhood.
Okay, it's not clear in housing piece. So that if you apply for counseling money for a certain amount, then you'll relook at that certain amount the second year?
Based on funding and performance, yes.
Okay.
That is our intention going forward. But it's always based on the funding applicability of what we will get in the federal funds and also the performance of the contractor.
So what if we have DPA this year, you know, from some other source, but next year we want to apply for it? Do we have to apply for it this year? I'm confused by that, because we're not going to apply for it this year, but we want to apply for it next year. And so if it's a 2-year process, I'm confused as how we're going to handle that.
We had set it up to have these as renewable in 2-year contracts. So I don't know what to speak. If you're already planning for next year, but you're not planning for this year,
Right.
It would seem like you have to get some stuff ready. But our intention was that we would fund the programs on a renewable basis in housing 2 years. Based on performance and applicability. That's not to say that come next year, if we get some extra money or we might release an RFP, that would be separate of that. That could be a separate type of initiative by the OED based on demand or stuff that we're seeing.
I hate to go through the whole process of submitting, you know, a NOFA for DPA
Yep.
if I don't need it this year, because we have some money from some other source, and we need to spend that. and I don't want to double up on it because, we had a problem with that NSP.
Right.
So I want to apply for it next year. But, so you need to talk to me, Doug, on how to handle that, okay?
Yeah, right now, we're looking at these as 2-year commitments for these services contracts.
So I'd have to do a proposal this year. Put 0 in this year.
If you're planning on going in on the NOFA, yeah, for that proposal.
Hi, I'm Stacy with the Salvation Army. Unfortunately, no one's behind me because I have 3 questions, so I'm going to hog the mic for just a minute. My first question is about geography. Actually, I have 2 about geographic preference. One is one of our programs is in Adams County, but it has a Denver address. Is that something that would be considered, or is it exclusively Denver County?
We would be looking at programs that are exclusively within the city and county of Denver.
Okay, thank you. And then, Seneca, in your presentation, you said that you would do, I believe you said priority exclusively for the ones that were listed, but the NOFA says preference for those neighborhoods. So I was just curious which one.
Yeah, I'm going kind of on our past experience.
Okay.
I think last year all of our funds were allocated to those neighborhoods that were listed as preference or priority. And I don't see that being any different this year.
Good to know, thank you. And then on the funding history document, the attachment for the NOFA, with the city funds, do you want the city funds that the whole organization receives, or just specific for that project?
Do you want me to speak? Yeah, the whole organization. Yeah.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
Hi, I'm Dan McIntyre with Denver Housing Authority Education and Employment Services. We currently are running the Sun Valley Employment Academy under Community Development Block Grant in Sun Valley, of course. We've run into some very interesting sort of neighborhood dynamics where maybe the program wasn't designed well for the population in Sun Valley, but we've had some pretty good successes with the program nonetheless. That said, my sort of thinking is that we'd like to reapply for Sun Valley so that we keep sort of a consistent model there, but we also have Choice Neighborhoods initiatives coming to Sun Valley, it looks like, starting next year. So my thought is, just your opinion, if we took the same model that we applied for last year and attained, and then performed somewhat, like I said, decently with, would it be detrimental to apply for the funding coming up now for Westwood and bring that program out of Sun Valley into Westwood, knowing that we're going to have a stopgap with CNI? Or would it look better to CDBG's evaluation committee to keep that program in Sun Valley?
That's a difficult question without actually seeing the application.
Right.
And I believe this is a program that we have funded for this year, 2016.
Yes, sir.
We would obviously evaluate the performance of that program, and that would have some bearing on how we would fund, potentially next year.
Right.
But in terms of geography,
Right.
Westwood is a priority, Sun Valley is a priority, and so whether you're operating in one or the other or both, you would be eligible.
Okay, so it doesn't really matter if I keep it consistent in Sun Valley or bring it out of Westwood.
It shouldn't matter.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Hi, I'm Terry Ames with Nehemiah Global. We have different entities, and my question deals with, do we have to be, I think it's for Nicole, do we have to be either MBA or DBE? Either MBE, Minority Business Enterprise, or DBE, as far as the contracting?
I'm sorry, I couldn't understand your
Do
question.
we have to be, as a vendor or contractor, a disadvantaged business enterprise, or minority business enterprise, or a disadvantaged business enterprise, I guess, in contracting?
No, you do not have to have that certification to apply to the NOFA, and it's not actually a part of the consideration for awards. However, congratulations if your entities are certified, and we encourage that for everybody, but it's not a requirement.
Our entities, Nehemiah Global feeds about 600,000 people a year as a food bank ministry, multiple states. So we also take care of the disabled, kids and adults, intellectual developmental disability. So I'm looking at a mixed-use property that's in Downey, and it's basically would have both for veterans as well as those who are disabled intellectually and developmental. Is there how do I approach the grant if the housing, housing wise, we're dealing with disabilities for housing and Veterans Administration for housing?
I can answer one part of that, and just being very upfront with you is that we would not be able to really give you technical assistance on how to write your proposals, your responses to the application. What I would really encourage is another reread of the application and try to identify, and I would also inform you that we're not surprised by some entities that submit multiple applications. So it's possible all of what you're seeking to provide to the community may not be one program itself, and so you may want to make multiple applications. But since you're speaking of housing, I just want to make sure I defer to the housing manager.
It sounds like you were describing somewhat of a development project.
Yes,
And so,
about $7
yeah.
million.
So for development projects, as mentioned before, it's not part of this NOFA. We accept those through a separate application that's on our website online, and there's also contact information and instructions on that application. So we accept those on a rolling basis currently.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Hello. Hi, Seneca. My name is Stacy Sagesi with the Rocky Mount Microfinance Institute, and it's been a while since we've been looking towards this partnership, so we're excited to see microbusiness and entrepreneurship back in the mix. So my questions are a little bit more nitty-gritty and reporting based in some of that. So Seneca, you mentioned just organizations having the capacity to be able to report. So I wonder if you could just speak a little bit more about what that consists of, the frequency, and then specifically in the NOFA, it talks about being able to document the eligibility of low to moderate income participants. Could you just remind me, if you will, about what all that looks like?
Sure. So when I speak to capacity, or when I was speaking to capacity, really I'm talking about administrative capacity, so that in your office you have the ability to essentially accept our funds, use our funds. Our scope process development is very intensive, you'll recall. We will work with you guys to develop the measurements. Also, there are quarterly or monthly reports, depending on our experience with the organization. And that's when you actually have to prove that you are actually addressing the needs of low and moderate income populations. We will work with you at the scope development process to really make sure that you have the right documentation to prove that you are actually meeting the needs of that target. And some of it is self-certification, some of it is supported with additional documentation. We can walk through that as we start to develop the scope.
Okay, awesome. And one last question. In the past, we've had some, I don't want to say challenges, but based on our model and the requirement or the question around unduplicated individuals served. So we are a very go deep type of organization with a fewer amount of people. I wonder, I looked at some of the stuff online, and it seems that the NOFA, or the application, is addressing both unduplicated number of people served, but then has the potential for total services provided to one person. I just wonder if you can speak to that, the interest in that kind of model being supported versus just number of people.
Are you speaking to the fact that an individual will go through multiple courses, right, through your program?
Exactly.
I don't think that should be a problem as long as we address that up front in the scope development, and we would essentially just count that person as one unduplicated.
Okay.
And so what's going to happen is it's going to obviously lower the total amount of people that are impacted.
Right.
But understanding the nature of your program, I think that's not something that would be all that concerning to us.
Okay. And I think just there's the front end of the process to be able to lower the number of unduplicated people served. That raises then the cost per individual, right?
Sure.
Which I just want to make sure that there's an opportunity to explain that in application, but then also capturing the impact on the back end to say that the reason that people are successful is because of all those touch points, and to be able to call that out as impact as well.
Yeah, we can have that discussion, and it's easier, right? Because I'm familiar with your program. But we can talk about that in our external meeting when if we see that we're going to move forward with your application, we'll invite you in, and then we can have a very kind of detailed conversation about that.
Okay.
But understanding that if you are going to spend a disproportionate amount of your resources on an individual, right, to really cultivate their development, then it's understood, right, that that's going to take more resources, and you're going to have kind of a more narrowly focused target population.
Okay, perfect. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Christina. I work with Grid Alternatives, and we are going into the NOFA with a scope of workforce development, job training to prepare the next generation of solar industry professionals. We have a number of partners in the process that are ready to sign on behind our application, but I had a couple of very technical budgetary questions if you guys are in for that. Yes, no? Yeah? I think that one of the first questions is, we do solar projects across the state, and while we don't intend to send somebody from here to Cortez, we might be working on a project where we're working with a job trainee from out of Sun Valley, working with one of our partners, to go to our project in maybe Adams County. Part of our budgetary process when we're doing our job trainings, we usually allocate a portion of our spending to purchasing the equipment that's necessary to actually get people the hands-on experience necessary to put it on their resume as job training experience. Do you see an issue as long as the job trainees that we are working with are in the target areas of Denver County and those target neighborhoods, going to get the job experience and hands-on training on a project that is outside of the Denver area? Does that make sense?
If I'm understanding you correctly, the benefit is going to be job training for Denver residents, although the training itself would be perhaps outside of the city and county of Denver?
Yes.
I believe that I'll look again, but I'm fairly certain that that's okay, because the benefit does apply to the Denver resident.
Okay. It is a big portion, of course, of being a construction agency. Our equipment is a big part
Sure.
of the training we provide. So if that equipment is being installed outside of Denver County, it's also being used to help people get the job experience they need.
Yeah, but we would not be paying for the equipment. We would be paying for the job experience.
True.
That's right.
Okay. And that's actually a second part of my question. Grid has traditionally gone into CDBG applications under the auspice of single-family rehabilitation, having put solar panels on single-family housing in order to help families get out from under energy burden. But in this scenario, we would go, again, in workforce development and would therefore be working to fund the training program itself. But in my experience with funding partners in this area is that our construction staff that is certified and licensed to train these volunteers is considered administrative. Is that the case in this NOFA?
Yeah, I think I would need a little bit more information to answer that correctly.
That's interesting. So right now I work with the City of Boulder. We're delivering single-family rooftop solar installations to 10 families for the City of Boulder. And while a vast majority of the funding is actually going to help pay for equipment installation, permitting, construction, et cetera, a portion of that funding has also been allocated to support the job trainees that we bring out on those projects to get hands-on experience in the field.
Sure.
But when we went to allocate a portion of the funding to pay the staff that is conducting the job training, I was informed that that was considered administrative and not program, and that therefore those funds were extremely
Is this
limited.
through the single-family rehab
Yes.
program?
Yes. So it's entirely different with the workforce development application?
Yeah, they're two different programs. But I could see how you'd want to make a distinction between the activities of both of them.
Yes.
So we would be primarily focused, or maybe exclusively focused, on the training and job development, job placement activities, not so much in the kind of hardware installation. And so you would have to, somewhere in your budget, make a distinction between those two costs.
Awesome. And one more question. Oh, I'm sorry. So in partnership with Solar Energy International, which is based out in Paonia, they are bringing a lot of their training and certification for solar industry opportunities to the Front Range, and we're working with them in partnership with the Colorado Department of Labor and Education. If there was an opportunity, if we were working with people that are actually underserved and looking for job training and certification and accreditation, would there be some opportunity to do a pass-through, almost scholarship package to a job trainee working with GRID with funding from CDBG?
You mean, okay, let me see if I got this right. You're talking about essentially providing a scholarship for some kind of certification that you would normally have to pay for?
Yes.
And you were talking about Denver residents, and you're talking about residents out of these target neighborhoods?
Yes.
I think that is something that we can consider.
Okay, thank you.
I would just for the compliance sake of it, if you were offering a scholarship, just know that we would be looking to see what entity is basically providing the training, and that it's a legally recognized and a legally recognized training provider.
Great.
So that would make the difference as well.
Okay, we can do that. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Karen Fox-Elwell with Mikasa Resource Center, and I have two questions, I believe, for Seneca. First question would be, I know we can submit multiple applications from one entity. We have programming in 2 of the focus neighborhoods, priority neighborhoods, as well as programming in 2 of the focus areas under the neighborhood area of workforce development and business development. Would there be a preference from the review committee if that's all under one application, if we take more of a geographical focus or more of a focus area, a content area focus, or is that up to our discretion?
So currently we fund 2 Mikasa programs. One is in Northeast Park Hill, and the other one is being administered out of your Acoma location. And you're suggesting that we...
So we have the 2 locations, and then within each of those locations, we have both workforce and business development.
I got you.
Activities.
Yeah, well, one of those, we would consider one of those applications a public service and the other one an EDI. So we would be looking for 2 separate applications.
Okay. Okay.
And that's essentially what you guys have now.
Okay.
You would just multiply that by both locations.
Okay, fabulous. And my second question is, with our relocation to Westwood in Q2 and needing to have activities from day one going off the ground, would it be possible, as we currently are, hosting some of those activities out of our central Denver location, and then in Q2 they'll be in the priority neighborhood of Westwood?
Yeah, as long as you're still targeting the residents in those neighborhoods that we'd identified, okay. Right?
Yes.
So if as you're kind of in between your move, you were still working with, say, for instance, the Westwood residents, and while you're still at your current location, that shouldn't be a problem.
Okay, great, thank you.
Hi, Chris Venable with Urban Peak. Seneca, you can keep the microphone. I'm not sure if this is 1 or 2 questions, but can you talk a little bit about the, in section B21 where it says building capacity by funding existing or new public service programs, how can we be applying for money that is going to be an expansion, but if we lose it, then we'd lose everything that we're doing, so there is no expansion of services? Does it have to be new and different, or can it be a continuation of what we're doing?
The preference is that we are leveraging our funds with other existing funds. So there is an expectation that there is some expansion, or that you're going to scale in some way, or you're providing a new service. That is our hope. Because of how tenuous our funding has been, we are reluctant to essentially have organizations' entire programs contingent on annual funds from the CDBG program. It's just it's a matter of us not setting up a program for failure due to our own inability to fund it over time.
Okay, and then the follow-up would just be where it says that CDBG funds cannot be substituted for any recent city or state funds. That doesn't mean what we're talking about right now. That's other funding that's not CDBG, correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, thanks.
Hi, I'm Paul Stein, Community Enterprise Development Services. I think this is the perfect is the enemy of the good kind of question. So for your shovel-ready concept, how shovel-ready is shovel-ready? So we've got existing programs, individual development account programs. I think we're the only IDA program left in Metro Denver, doing really good work with other funds, so refugee funds that we'd be leveraging in this project. That's shovel-ready to go and expand right now. But we also have some innovative ideas we've been talking about with other partners for different ways for acquiring properties. Those wouldn't be ready to roll out in the first quarter. So we'd be really comfortable starting with what we do and do really well, Q1, Q2 perhaps, and then the other partnerships and the expansion rolling in, later in the year. But we really wouldn't be able to fully flesh it out other than here's a good concept in the application. Is it better to leave that for another time, another funding source, or throw it into the mix for this one? Because we'd be really strong, I think, with what we already do. We're not worried about that.
Can you give me some background as to kind of what activities you're describing?
We've been looking at community land trusts. We already have an IDA program. It's a supported savings program that helps people with match savings. Again, we'd have to look at the match we have. Our current funding from the Office of Refugee Resettlement is just for refugees, and it's a one-to-one match. But it comes with first-time homebuyers assistance and a lot of training, so that we've gotten people, at this point, 100% success rate from savings into home ownership. So we would want to expand that for other populations. By bringing in a CL, community land trust, perhaps that might be a way to acquire more properties or make the entry price for ownership a little bit less. But it's just a concept, just starting some conversations.
So you're talking about using CDBG funds for the acquisition of property?
No.
Or
no.
just for the program?
Just for the program, just to help with the down payment assistance. We've already got partners who are able to help, at least our current program, get people into homes, again, through first-time home buyers programs.
I would suggest if it's a programmatic piece, that if it's not baked all the way, I would probably defer that. If you're ready, if you have a CLT, you're incorporated, you're a legal entity, you're looking to acquire some properties, you also have you're capitalized. That's a different model. Then you're ready to move on something, right. and you're looking for the development partner to help you with that.
Okay, but just sticking with the IDA piece, that would be within the ballpark of what you're looking at for down payment assistance?
I think I would have to get some more information for you, because I'm not sure if it's a housing program or an economic development program. We'd have to kind of make a distinction between kind of what it would fit in, what category it would fit in.
Okay, 'cause we've been thinking about it as housing. We're like Stacy, we're a micro enterprise program, but we thought about it as housing.
Sure. For the down payment assistance program, as we have it drafted in the NOFA, this is looking for an actual down payment with an actual mortgage product, ready to go. So somebody's been qualified for a mortgage, they have a gap, that gap has to be determined, so it won't be the same each time by the regulation. It has to be determined, and that gap then would be financed and that product would be bought. It wouldn't be like we're going to create a fund or an account for somebody that starts looking like an income payment that would eventually be used for a product that isn't identified yet, and that's putting the cart before the horse. For our down payment assistance program, that down payment is kind of the last kind of step in the process. They already have a qualification for a mortgage product, and they're ready to go, and they have a product to buy.
Okay, so this would, so I'm going behind me, whoops,
Yep.
a second. So you're looking for just the funds to close the gap pretty immediately once you've got the property decided?
Exactly right. To your shovel-ready point, there's an address, there's a person, they qualify, they get the down payment, and they're in.
Okay, it might still work, but within the time period. Because, okay, thanks.
All right.
So,
Hi, I'm Andrew Spinks with St. Francis Center, and OED's funded us before, and we really appreciate it. Question for Seneca. Acknowledging that this isn't a public facilities improvement round this time, how appropriate would capital improvement request be to a facility improvement, as long as it complied with everything else in the neighborhood development side of things?
Yeah, so that's separate from the NOFA, but the application is rolling, right? I believe the application was rolling until July of last year, and essentially what happens is that we'll develop a pipeline, and once those funds run out, we'll essentially close the application process. So it means if you have a project that's ready to go, in January 2017, I would go ahead and fill out an application as a PF&I, and we would consider it as part of our pipeline. But it's a little bit separate from kind of the NOFA discussion that we're having
Doesn't fit into
today.
This one.
Yeah.
All right, thanks.
Okay, any last minute questions? No? Okay. Just one quick reminder also, keeping in mind and moving forward with your programs, while we also want you to be ready to get off the ground immediately with your project and your program, we also want you to be able to consistently spend that down throughout the contract period. What we don't like to see is you're ready to go, but then it takes a little bit of time to get your program off the ground for the first 6 to 9 months, and then we're spending all of it at the last final phase of that contract. That just really helps us with our budgeting, with our requirements with HUD. So also keep that in mind. We want to see those programs ready to go and be able to spend consistently over the program year. So that was just one little final reminder. But outside of that, again, if you have any additional questions that come up while you're going through the application, looking through the guidelines, all of those documents on our Funding Opportunities website, do send those questions to oedproposals@denvergov.org. Also, if you do me a favor and make sure that you sign in at those sign-in sheets on the back table, I would appreciate it. And with that, I think we're dismissed.